Hey guys, Roxbox90 here with my countdown, top 10 best EDH cards coming out of Return to Ravnica, which is coming out tomorrow, which is super exciting. So I thought I'd put out my 10 favorite cards that are definitely going to be seeing some sort of play in EDH. So let's start right out with Dreadbore. So Dreadbore is pretty straightforward. It's a black-red sorcery, destroys a creature or planeswalker. So it's not exactly the most versatile destroy spell, and it's not an instant, but the fact that you can blow planeswalkers out of the sky is a huge deal in EDH, where planeswalkers are rampant. As well, being able to destroy a creature flat is pretty good. Not as good, maybe, as it is in other formats, but pretty good, I think, in EDH. Next up, we have Supreme Verdict. It's a 4-cost sorcery that can be countered, Day of Judgment. So, I'm not quite sure about this card. That's probably why it's low on the list, is because even though it can't be countered, it's flat out Day of Judgment, which is not particularly great per se in EDH, where things can be regenerated, where there's lots of different spells to thwart it outside of the fact that it can't be countered. However, if you were to choose it over things like Day of Judgment, I would definitely pick. I may even pick it over things like Wrath of God, and at 4 cost, it's pretty darn good. Next up, we have Rakdos Charm. It's a black and red instant spell that lets you choose one of 3 abilities. Exile all cards from target player's graveyard, destroy an artifact, or each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. So of course I'm sure I'm going to get flack for choosing this card because it's not one of the huge bombs of the set, but I think it's an incredible card that will see lots of play. It's instant speed, 2 cost. It allows you to remove someone's graveyard entirely, which is fantastic in EDH, where you want a scalpel-like effect like this sort. If anything, it's a choice to make / sideboard card for that effect. Destroy target artifact is always good for 2 costs. It's shatter, but in EDH there's lots of artifacts to be shattered. Or each creature does 1 damage to its controller is pretty sick because you end up where decks that run any number of sizable tokens, it's a lot of damage. Not as good as it would be in the regular format, pretty good. The fact that you can choose is fantastic because it gives you the options at the time. The commands, the Austere Command, Cryptic Command, and others are fantastic because they give you the ability to choose, even if the abilities aren't the greatest things ever. Rakdos Charm, I think, is pretty good, and it might even make the cut. Counter Flux is up next. It's a 2 blue and red instant spell that can't be countered. Counter target spell you don't control, and it gives you an overload effect that is essentially Mind Break Trap in terms of its effect. So what I like about it is it's a weirdly like Last Word, I think it was called. It's a 4-cost can't be countered counter spell. It's pretty much the same thing, but for 3. It's just better. It says allows you to counter target spell you don't control. The overload is a nice bonus because it mind breaks traps as well. So it's kind of a 2-for-1. And I think it's a really good way to give yourself options in EDH of all formats. Next up, we have Grave Betrayal. It's 5 and 2 black for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you don't control dies, put it back into play under your control with an additional 1/1 counter at the beginning of the next end step. This is crazy. Let alone zombie decks, the last effect is really nice for zombie tribal, but it basically allows you, as long as it remains around, which is not so likely, but as a card, if it remains around, it is a game-changing card. It is game-ending. Creatures die with regularity. Huge creatures come out. They hit the graveyard. There's tons of abuse with graveyards and with creatures, and it allows you to just gather them all in. Multiplayer, it's absolutely insane. I wouldn't say 1v1 is particularly great, but as a general EDH card, I think it can be pretty amazing. Next, we have Epic Experiment, which is Genesis Wave, essentially. So that is just fantastic. So Epic Experiment, it lets you do the same thing with instants and sorceries. And it's just gives you a huge variety of spells. In EDH, where you have tons of mana, this spell can take crazy effect, even more than in other formats. Next, we have Chromatic Lantern, which is kind of a staple card that people will be running in 2, 3, and 4, 5 color decks in EDH. No questions asked. It's a Darksteel Ingot in terms of its effect, or any of those cards that tap add 1 mana for 3. But it also gives all your lands perfect mana fixing. That's just unbelievable. As a single card, doing both at once, it's crazy, and definitely going to see lots of play. Next, we're getting to the end here. Cyclonic Rift returns target non-land permanent you don't control, to its owner's hands. 1 and a blue for that. So that's basic, a variety unsummon. That's pretty sick. And the overload is insane. The overload is 7 mana, which allows you to return all non-land permanents you don't control to their owner's hands. At instant speed, it's evacuation on steroids. It's crazy. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Fantastic Wrath spell, and I'm sure I'm going to run into this card. In multiplayer, it's just going to likely make you the dominant force of the game just by playing it, and it's 1v1, it still has an endgame effect. I think it's just overall a very powerful card. Next up, Rakdos' Return. This card is number 2 for a good reason, because it's crazy in EDH. It's black and a red and X. Sorcery, it deals X damage to target opponent. That player discards X cards. In effect, in 1v1 particularly, but even in multiplayer, it's a scalpel that is killer. Huge card advantage in every way, shape, or form. For throw out infinite mana, forget the infinite mana, which inevitably just makes you win with this card, like many others. But the discard effect is crazy. Even if you play it for not so much mana, taking away cards out of their hands, on top of dealing damage, is huge, huge impact in terms of what it does. And I think it's absolutely phenomenal card, and we'll see lots of play. And number 1, Angel of Serenity. This is number 1 because it's just so good in EDH. It's just so unbelievably good. Where can I start? Cost is a bit rough. It's 4 and 3 white, and that's sad. But it's a reanimate card, so reanimator decks can get it right out. Mono and bicolor decks should have no problem getting her. And in fact, even every deck except for 5 color should be able to run her for sure. Her body is solid, 5/6 flying, so that's fantastic, but her effects are so good. This is assuming you don't have enter the battlefield effects, meaning you don't reuse the enter battlefield effects, which you may or may not. Most decks can to some effect, either player when she dies from the graveyard again, or put her back in her hand and put it back in hand and replay. Craziness. The fact that you can exile 3 target creatures from the graveyard or from play. So it's a scalpel on Reanimator. It destroys, it damages dread decks. In effect, it allows you to reuse your own spells. It allows you to, wow, just go on and on about her. Allows you to ETB effect, where you can, spells that you use once that have entered the battlefield, if you pull them out of play and then replay them, lets you do that. I mean, Snapcaster Mage, just off the top of my head, Eternal Witness, so many cards that are cheap, and she'll let you reuse it because they go back into your hand. In terms of bombs, it takes care of your opponent's bombs. It's just a fantastic, fantastic card that has immediate impact in huge ways on the field, no matter when you play her. And not only will she see lots of play, but in my opinion, I think she's probably overall the best card out of Return to Ravnica. And I'm going to throw in there as honorable mention, because you can't have a top 10 list if you have 11 cards, but Jarrod Golgari Lichlord is pretty solid, I think, not only as a general, but also in terms of his ability, that you can use his ability, you don't need haste. It's that sacrifice a creature, each opponent loses life equal to the power. Pretty beast card. It's going to definitely have a good body in EDH. Almost guarantee it's going to be at least a 4/4, 5/5 for its body size. And that's just phenomenal. When it's not a commander, you can be able to get it back in your hand by getting rid of lands. Not the greatest thing, but it's a fine. Really, the second ability makes him pretty cool. And the reason I cut him out is because it's just for that. Anyway, that is my list of top 10 EDH cards coming out of Return to Ravnica, which comes out tomorrow, so hope everyone's super excited about that. Please feel free to comment below or PM me your thoughts on my list and your own thoughts. Maybe you guys have different opinions. Totally fine. I'd love to talk it out with everybody. Please check out my channel sponsors below in the description as well. Look forward to more openings from them in the near future, and I hope to see you guys next time. Rocks a Box of 90s, signing out.